Audiovisual. Our project was the Audiovisual Ensemble, and we were trying to take audio and visual content and to combine it in a way that seemed seamless, like there was really no separation between what we were doing with audio and how that was being represented visually. The concept behind what we were doing is Allegory of Cave by Plato, and essentially in that story, people are only allowed to see shadows. They're slaves and they're being chained. They're not allowed to turn their heads. So what they know of the world is just based upon the shadows that they see. And I thought that the DMX lights and the backlit projector screen was a good analogy for being able to produce shadows behind the screen to tell that story. And then literally, you know, as we progress through the journey, you know, you exit out of the cave and then you see the daylight, and that's representing what objects really are in real life. I think the symbolism behind what the shadows represent can say a lot about how we perceive things in real life and how objects in life can have a secondary meaning to them, and that we shouldn't necessarily forget the shadows, even though we might understand the real meaning of what an object is or what a concept is. It's still good to know kind of the symbolic essence of it as well.
Following the narrative of Plato's cave, we're actually setting the audience in the situation as the prisoners inside the cave. The shadows represent their opinion about the world, even though they are just illusions. Then someone starts to become suspicious of the shadows, and the combination of lines and colors is actually a metaphor of conflict between different opinions. Afterward, when the character comes back into the cave again, the graphic is projected directly on the audience, which represents the phenomenon that they are experiencing a crash between new theories and old ones.
I'm Schumann. I'm from design and digital media, and I work as a video performer in our audiovisual group. Basically, I made several videos to match our theme, the cave. In space, it's a really great place, so I can project my videos on the side walls. Thanks very much to Martin, our supervisor. He gave me the ready-made patch, so I can use this interface to control my videos.
Creating an audiovisual performance to me involves the composition of music elements and visual elements like images or movies. And to do that, what you really want to achieve is to compose the relationship or the matching between both the content of the sonic elements and the visual elements, and as well the form or the shape in which those elements are presented. What is really important to me, more than the actual visual content of each TV, is the patterns that the whole system of TVs shows as I play my instrument. Those patterns, of course, are put in relation to the sonic content, which is much more complex than just a TV screen flickering.
performance, I'm hiding behind the screen and making shadows. At the day before the performance, something happened and something changed, which comes to a result that only 4 of us would do the performance and Marco would do his solo presentation. With the absence of one person, some elements are no longer there and the rest elements become more important.
My role in it was to work with the lighting. So I had a bass guitar that was controlling some synthesizers and audio effects that got interpreted into data that was used to control our DMX lighting consoles. So for me, the biggest challenge was learning how to work with the DMX system and to get that to be as responsive as the audio that I was sending to control the lighting itself.
My name is Russell. I'm a digital composition performance student. My instrument, this is like the 6th version of, I wanted to experiment with a phenomenon called beats, which is basically phase cancellation between 2 sine waves that are slightly out of tune. But I found in the physics world, a visual representation of this can be found in something called a Lissajous curve, which is basically if you vibrate sand on a plate, it forms these patterns, which are basically, it's the same principles of phase cancellation that form those. So I created 2D and then eventually 3D images using the data from the beats into a jitter patch to create essentially visuals that were linked to the audio. So in that way I created an audiovisual instrument. The color palette and things were inspired by more synesthesic ways of people associating certain frequencies with colors. And the timbres eventually switched to adapt to our theme of the allegory of the cave. I put in more effects to have more cave-like sounds and more, let's go with spooky timbres, or things that weren't as musical. I added some synthesized voices of people actually reading portions that I felt were powerful to me of Allegory of a Cave. Certain passages. It's very political, and it's crazy that the Greeks used a democratic system and we still use a democratic system, and all the principles that are wrong, that were issues back in Greek times, are still issues, really. And the passages that I was focusing on were related to those. They're very convoluted because there's so much information out there already. I didn't want to convey exactly, but the semantic content of some sounds that I were making were directly related to political issues that I think were important. They're still important now that were important in Greek times. Together forever.
So the question is how our instruments work together. Originally my idea was to have a band situation, like a traditional band situation where everybody has their own instrument and you have a rock band with drums, guitar, bass, vocals. So if everyone had that paradigm with an audiovisual instrument, then everyone created a light source or created some type of a visual and then also had an audio component to it.
And I jumped on board to that concept of a band, which is funny because I was a professional bass player before I came here and Timo was playing bass and I was playing a controller. So our roles kind of switched from what we would normally be doing outside of school. But the band paradigm is it's one that I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon, like in the world. Just like the kind of equal contributions from each person, and you each have a role. But what's unique with electronic music is you get to adapt the instrument you play. Like, I guess that's the main difference. And what's great about it is that you're not playing the guitar, you're not playing the drums, you're playing an instrument that you've made specifically for either the gig or for the ensemble in general, which I think we did pretty nicely. Many long nights being like, what about that sound? Are you sure about that sound? Oh, okay, yeah, no, it's awesome. And just tweaking things.
Also, we knew what we didn't want to do. I guess often you see people just sitting behind laptops and you're not really sure how the music is tied to any of the type of visuals, and we didn't really want to do something that was just like a generative video type situation where there's some random video in the background being played over what we were doing as musicians. So we were really looking for ways that would efficiently tie the audio to the visuals together in a way that was fun. It was really fun playing my instrument and not being tied to the computer for the most part, but being tied to it for the most part.
Yeah.
But it didn't look like we were tied to it, at least.
Yeah.
And like Russell said, it took a lot of practice to dial it in. And what we were really striving for was to get some type of movement where it wasn't just really static and just one certain type of sound. So we really had to go in and make sure that our controllers were very flexible in terms of the sounds that they produced, and also at the same time make sure that that correlated to the visuals that we were doing, so that they were succinct.
Yeah. Yeah, we both, the system that I made, like, I had so many more, like ways to control stuff that, like, at last minute I could add whatever. I still had, like, I think I counted like 1,500 different parameters that I could use.
And that's another thing, like limiting yourself. Obviously, there's a million things that you can do and a million ideas that you can have. And when we first started with our project, there was no shortage of ideas.
That's
but
true.
it took probably the greatest amount of effort was just to really decide on what, as a group, we wanted to do that was going to be relevant to all of us and our areas of expertise.
That's definitely true.
But all in all, I think that the experience as a group, I think we grew. We all came from different backgrounds with different ideas about what we wanted the project to be. And it was really great to see kind of everyone's roles develop for kind of the greater good of the project itself, and to see people shift paradigm midway through and to be able to compromise on a central theme.
Yeah,